Chapter 31. 6.5 hours later, Adele knew the answer to that question. Unlocking the bar and setting up the till had gone uneventfully at 11:15. No one was waiting on the doorstep, not even Norma or Parrot Freddy. She scrubbed the bar's single toilet with bleach. She hummed cheerfully as the sun came in the front window. It lit up the dancing dust motes, sure, but they were pretty. She could take care of the problems. One by one, she'd fix this place up. It would be fun, satisfying. A beer truck arrived at noon. Adele greeted the driver cheerfully. Time to learn. She waited to watch what the driver did, but apparently it was the guy's first day, and he looked at her with a slack jaw when she asked him to just do whatever the last guy did. She was the one who rolled the kegs into the back room and lifted each one, her arms shaking with the effort of the fifth. He disappeared so fast after the last keg was unloaded that she didn't even have time to ask him how they were billed. Norma came in at 1 o'clock, but her mood was different. Instead of her normal long blue dress, she was clad head to toe in black. She was quiet, and she drank steadily. When Adele asked if she was okay, she didn't answer. She just pushed her glass over the counter for another martini. Had she gotten a text from Nate, too? After 4 martinis, Adele started to worry about her. How are you supposed to know when to cut someone off? Was it based on alcohol tolerance, size, history? Norma was still quiet, even after she ordered her fifth. But was it an explosive quietness? Adele couldn't tell. 2 men came in at 3 o'clock, followed by 2 more 15 minutes later. They all sat at a table and played cards. It might have been poker, and it sure as hell looked like they were playing with real cash. The Wi-Fi went out as Adele brought up a search window on her phone. Is poker for money legal in California? She was pretty sure she knew the answer, but before confronting them about it, she wanted the law in her hand to show them. She searched for the modem to reset it but couldn't find it anywhere, and this spot on the coast seemed to have no satellite coverage at all. Damn it. At 5 o'clock, a family came in, a young mother wearing a green and white flowered dress and bedazzled flip-flops. The father dressed in corporate casual dockers and a t-shirt that read, "Code This." 3 little boys followed them in, raucous ducks bobbing and weaving in their wake. The parents sat at the bar while the boys raced each other from the jukebox to the door and back. 2 rum and cokes, the man said without looking at Adele. 3 Rob Roys and 4 grilled cheese sandwiches. We'll share. Sorry, said Adele. We don't serve hot food here. The man dropped his sunglasses an inch to stare past her. Seriously? His wife made a distressed noise. It's fine, Maris. We just get ice cream afterward at the place up the road. It's just a bar, then. The woman looked scandalized, as if she expected fish-netted prostitutes to ooze out from the storeroom. A saloon, yeah. The website said the Golden Spike was a hotel, cafe, and saloon. Was is the right verb. Currently under renovation. Are my children even allowed in here? Adele had been allowed in the bar as a child. Of course she had. Though maybe that had just been Uncle Hugh flouting the law. Adele would Google it, but the Wi-Fi was still down. And after an hour of searching, she still hadn't found the modem. Where would Nate have hidden it, for the love of God? Who knew if children were allowed in a bar anymore? Adele cast a beseeching glance at Norma. Wouldn't she have an opinion on this? But the older woman now had a single track of silent tears running down either side of her face. Her tarot cards stayed in a quiet stack in front of her. Inexplicably, there was a candle holder in front of her now, and it kind of looked like a menorah in September. And was set a pile of candles in the plastic bag hanging next to her on the coat hook? Adele made a hurried mental note to find the fire extinguisher, right after she found out if kids were allowed in a bar. Not that it mattered. The 3 children didn't appear to be children. They were wildebeests. One had climbed to the top of the jukebox and was straddling it, apparently trying to shake the songs loose with his hips. The middle-sized boy was on the stage, yanking on an amp cord. The smallest was lying on the floor, trying to lick up what looked like an old piece of bubblegum. Just the 5 drinks, then? She got an irritated nod from the father and, make mine a double, from the mother. The Rob Roys were easy, Molly's favorite childhood drink. But Adele really didn't know what a double rum and coke was. It should be easy, but the more she thought about it, the harder it got. 2 shots, right? Instead of 1, or did a single actually have 2 shots? How much coke? Did you double that, too, for a double? Another thing that would have been instantly answered by the MIA internet. She just made both of them stronger than seemed necessary and handed them over. The mother muttered something about yelping the place, and Adele bit the inside of her lip hard. Was there a way to pay to remove bad reviews? 30 minutes later, a boy and girl came in who couldn't be more than 19. Their IDs, though, looked perfect. "What's your birthday?" Adele asked the girl. The girl recited the date without hesitation, and then, unprompted, added the address listed. "Are you an organ donor?" she asked the boy, noticing the red dot's absence on his ID. "Not yet," he said apologetically, "but I'm totally going to sign up." "Emmylou Harris," Adele muttered. She made their drinks, too old-fashioned. Within half an hour, they were both in the single washroom, and the walls were making rhythmic noises, audible in the saloon. Adele put $5 of her own money in the jukebox. Shouldn't there be a key for this? And hit random, but all that came out, song after song, were Darling Songbird tunes. One of the poker players said something about what you got when you crossed a Dixie chick with a Darling Songbird, but Adele, her cheeks on fire, hurried out the front door with a broom to avoid hearing the answer. She swept the wooden porch and then swept the last good porch swing on the property. She reached up and swept the cobwebs out of the high corners for good measure. Then she sat. It didn't creak and fall, but it was probably only a matter of time. Screw the customers. If anyone needed a refill, they'd all seen her go outside. They knew where to find her. She leaned forward, putting her elbows on her knees, covering both her eyes with her hands. She could smell the salt of the ocean just a block away. The slow murmur was something so integral to Darling Bay she almost never heard it, but now it filled her ears. A shush, shush. It should have been soothing. This was paradise, after all. It would have been soothing if she hadn't been freaking out. Adele concentrated on her breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. In, out. Repeat. She had a sudden visceral memory of her breathing the night before. She'd literally panted for Nate. Her breath had heaved, and his had done the same. His body had covered hers as he'd entered her, both of them slick with sweat. His breathing had started to sound like her own until she couldn't tell what was his air and what was hers. Going that good, huh? The swing dipped, the chains creaking as Nate dropped himself down next to her. It felt as if she'd conjured him. Feelings rose in her, more potent than any cocktail she could mix. Relief, lust, irritation, and, most worrisome of all, a heady wave of joy. Could he see all of it? Was it written on her face? Adele tried to fix a scowl onto her features, but the happiness, the sheer gladness of seeing him next to her, might be radiating through. Yep. Wanna tell me why you look like your teeth are gnashed together? I'm speaking. My teeth can't be gnashed together if I'm talking. Nate pulled a face, sticking out his lower jaw. Yes, they can. His face, that damn ball cap worn backward, his flannel shirt worn open over a black t-shirt. He was so comfortable in his maleness. God, she wanted to touch his jaw, to run her fingers along that bone that jutted out south of his ear. Light stubble. He must have left her this morning and gone somewhere and shaved. Had he napped? They'd had almost no sleep, but he looked bright, refreshed. He looked the opposite of how she felt. Her stomach made a yawning noise, and she wondered if she'd eaten anything yet. No wonder she felt a little dizzy. She stood, feeling awkward. So, he stayed seated, his legs splayed comfortably, as if he owned the whole building. So, he agreed. If he'd been wearing a cowboy hat, he would have touched its brim. She just knew it. I thought you weren't coming to work today. Oh, I ain't working. I just came in for a beer. Adele sucked in a quick breath. He was trying to get to her. That was fine. He could try all he wanted. She'd remain calm. What would you like? Say something in a can. Say something in a can. How about a black and tan? His eyes danced. That was a beer mix, she knew, but she didn't know much more than that. But she said, you got it. She'd put something black in a glass and then put something tan on top of it, and he would like it, by God. Adele didn't look to see if he followed her, and she tried to tell herself that it didn't matter one way or the other. But she heard the swing's chain creak as he stood, and she could feel his eyes on her backside as she pushed her way through the half door. She tried to add an extra sway to her hips and instead felt like she was hiccuping from her tailbone. Not a good look. Behind the bar, she pulled a half glass of Guinness and topped it, still thick with foam, with a light IPA. That's a black and tan. Nate looked so satisfied that she had screwed it up. That's the only way to make one. People who say to do it the other way are just plain wrong, I've always said. He stared into the foaming top and took a slow, careful sip. Oh. Adele crossed her arms, daring him to criticize her drink. Instead, he tipped his head to the side. He was listening to the damn Darling Songbirds song that had just started playing. Classic. Wait Till Your Father Gets Home was one of the songs that had risen the band to fame. It had been a coincidence entirely. Alana had been reading Little Women for the first time when she wrote it, but it happened to come out near September 11th. It had become an anthem. It had been the song playing when Molly went down on stage. The night that ended everything. The night the band and the sisters broke up. I swear to God I didn't put this on. I hit the random button. Sure you did. It's just playing Darling Songbirds. I can't make it do anything else. Your uncle wasn't too fond of the random button. Possibly paid the tech to reprogram it, so it wasn't really random. Sweet Dolly Parton. She sat on the high stool she'd placed behind the bar. Nope, not on random anyway. Nate's shoulders jumped as a particularly loud thunk came from the bathroom area. Ignore, please. What is that? I believe it's two teenagers having sex. His eyes widened. Lucky kids. Most of them have to do it in the back of pickup trucks around here. Aren't you nice? You didn't card them? Adele willed him to leave, to drain his beer before he noticed everything else wrong around him. But his eyes stayed on hers, light and amused, and his long fingers, oh, those fingers. She'd sucked them one by one last night, making him groan, stayed wrapped around his glass. Adele squirmed on the stool and then stood. It was just more comfortable to lean her arms on the bar top anyway. Their IDs were perfect. Signatures and birthdays raised? Sorry? They have good machines, but most of them can't do the raised embossing. You can tell by rubbing your thumb across the card. He reached forward, wrapping his fingers around her wrist. His thumb swept slowly across the skin of her wrist. Like this. Adele's mouth lost all moisture. She pulled back her hand quickly. Well, what am I supposed to do? Bang on the door and ask to see their IDs again? They're underage. That's a hefty fine. How much? $1,000, plus a year in jail if they throw the book at you, which, this being Darling Bay, they might not. But do you want to gamble on that? You're kidding. Speaking of fines, what's with the Rugrats? He pointed at the boys with the disgruntled yuppie parents. One boy was tapping his head against a wooden rail, and another was sitting open-mouthed on the floor, his eyes fixed on the air in front of him. The third boy wasn't even visible, but neither parent appeared concerned, both absorbed with their cell phones. Apparently they had satellite service. Adele straightened her shoulders. They're with their mom and dad. Still illegal. We don't serve food. You can't have a kid in a bar unless it serves meals. You like playing chicken with the penal code, huh? The door swung open and a tall, dark-haired man entered. Now you have real trouble, said Nate. Why? That's the sheriff. Oh, no. Wait, Colin McMurdy is a sheriff now? Oh, crap. Want help with him? God, the satisfaction audible in Nate's voice was enough to choke a pelican. Adele would not say yes. She couldn't. But then the sheriff's gaze landed on the poker table. Yes, said Adele. Mother Mabel Carter, help me. Chapter 32. It was a little pathetic, maybe, to be so good at this one thing. Nate had felt the occasional pang of remorse that his true life's talent seemed to be keeping a bar running while helping the patrons stay on track, too. But right now, it felt damn good. He greeted Sheriff McMurdy with a thump on the shoulder. Colin, good to see you, brother. Been a while. Colin wasn't one for grinning, but he smiled wide enough. You too, Nate. Let me buy you a beer. They'd been friends a long time, and Nate's mother and her frequent jail stays had gotten them acquainted back when Colin was a rookie on the force. Quite a few years had passed since then. No thanks. Colin's gaze raked the room again. On duty. Got a call about... Nate cut him off. Hey, you two must know each other, right? Local yokels and all. Adele all but audibly gulped. Good to see you again, Colin. Colin's face softened. Heard you were back in town, girl. While Adele came around the end of the bar to hug the sheriff, Nate swung into action. He grabbed the extra bathroom key. On his way to the back, he swooped to where Lane Thomas and his boys were playing poker. "Put the money away, Statter. You're out on your ear, and I'll tell your wives, too." He grabbed a boy who looked about 9 years old by the back of the shirt. "Are you chewing on that wood? You're not a termite. Hey, Mom and Dad, you can't have your kids in a bar. What kind of parents are you?" The appalled gasps and squeaks the parents made were righteously satisfying. He hoped they'd threaten to sue. Those were his favorites. Then, ignoring the dad's heated puffings, he hauled ass to the back bathroom and gave the door 3 short raps. "Pants up," he called. "I'm coming in." When he unlocked the door, the boy, Roman Elmwood's son Bruce, was hurriedly struggling with his belt buckle while his girlfriend, the Landry's youngest, hastily reapplied lipstick. "We weren't doing anything," said Bruce. "Don't play a player." Nate held out his hand. "IDs." "No way." Bruce shook his head. "IDs, or I call your parents and tell them you weren't using a condom." "But we did use one," gasped the girl, who only then realized her mistake. "I mean—" "Now. They cost me $500, Bruce grumbled, but he put them in Nate's hand. "That was all the money I had." "Did you get them local?" There'd been a guy at the mobile home park that had an ID printing rig, but Colin had shut him down last year. It would be worth passing the news on to the sheriff if he'd popped back up. "Internet." "So you're stupid as well as broke. And seriously, keep using protection. You're too dumb to be parents yet. You see those idiots out there with their kids? You want to end up like that? Out." He waved his arms like he was shooing a cow out of a field. "Get out of here." They hightailed it. In the saloon, Colin was still talking to Adele. Her face was bright, and she looked genuinely happy to see the sheriff. Had they ever dated? They were about the same age, weren't they? The space between Nate's shoulder blades was suddenly tight. He imagined Colin's hand against her face, Colin going in for a kiss, and he felt a blast of something hot and shocking in his gut. Jealousy. The second time he'd felt it in his life, and both times it was about Adele. He was known for not getting jealous, blast it. Past girlfriends had gone so far as to try to make him feel the green-eyed monster to prove his affection. It had never worked except to tick him off and make him break up with them faster. This feeling, though, this stomach-churning pit of acid in his belly, it just made him sick. Stupid. He was being an idiot, as dumb as those kids in the John. Keep it moving, Houston. He brought his bar, her bar, and its patrons back into focus. Laney and his boys were gone, a single ace of hearts face up on the floor under Ned Randall's seat. He'd always been a god-awful cheat. Nate raked up the pile of ones they'd left behind and stuck it in the tip jar. The parents with their hellions were gone. That only left Norma. Poor thing. She sat at the end of the bar, and he could tell by her pallor that she was at least 6 martinis in, maybe 7. He looked at his phone to confirm it, but he already knew what day it was just by the color of her dress. 30 years prior, her father had died on the 19th of August. Now, every single month on the 19th, Norma commemorated his death. For every drink she had, Nate made her have a glass of water and light a candle. The man had died on his 80th birthday. Nate had found a candelabrum online that held each of the 8 candles she lit for every decade of his life. It wasn't until he'd unwrapped it that he thought maybe it was a menorah. He'd been a little worried he might get in trouble for using it disrespectfully if that was the case. On the other hand, the base was decorated with a ring of skulls, so it was possible that he was reading too much into the number. Norma could get away with 8 drinks, but only if she started early. Only if she ate something solid. He usually brought her a sandwich from Nell's, and only if she took it slow. It was usually a long, sad day, but he liked that if she was going to be so sad, he was the one who was with her. "Hey, sweetheart." Nate sat next to her, instead of standing opposite her like he usually did. Norma mumbled something almost inaudible. "What was that?" "Lighter. She didn't give me one." Another mumble. "Matches." "She couldn't find them, huh?" He grabbed the bag of candles. He stuck in all 8 and found a lighter for her. "Here you go. Light 'em up." "All 8? Norma looked surprised and glanced out the window. "Already? It's still light out." Even if she hadn't had 8 drinks, the tear tracks meant she was cut off. Adele hadn't noticed her silent crying? "Yep, already. I'll walk you home after you light them and blow them out, okay?" Norma struggled to insert the first candle, but then again, her hand wasn't steady even when she was sober. While she worked at it, Nate tried to catch his breath. Anger lit inside him, a blue flame of heat. Adele wouldn't be good at this, not even with training. This wasn't her world. He wanted to physically heave her onto the sidewalk and lock her out, and with the next breath, he wanted to kiss her within an inch of her life. The push and pull of the two feelings was miserable, and he waited for his breath to slow. Norma had all the candles lit, and Colin was saying goodbye to Adele by the time Nate felt it was safe for him to sidle down the bar. "See you soon," he said, clapping Colin's hand in a shake. "Horseshoes? At the Dohertys?" "You got it. Hey, you need a hand with her?" Colin jerked his thumb towards Norma. Adele gasped. "Don't arrest her. If she's too drunk, it's my fault for serving her." Colin and Nate both laughed. "I meant walking her home," said the sheriff. "I'm happy to do it." "You read my mind." Nate helped Norma blow out the candles. He hugged her for a long minute as she wept lightly against his chest, then gave her to the safekeeping of Colin. "Thanks, man. Anytime." Then the saloon was empty. Just the two of them. Nate sat back down on his bar stool on the customer side. "I owe you a thank you." Adele rubbed the top of the bar with a napkin. She didn't wet it first, and it just stuck to the varnish. Nate waited. She didn't say anything else. So Nate said, "Go ahead, then. I'm waiting." Chapter 33. Nate waited to see what she'd say. She pulled in her lips, those soft, still slightly swollen lips, and looked up at the ceiling. Her breasts were pert and perfectly displayed in the low-cut V of her t-shirt. Nate dragged his gaze from them and back up to her eyes, those ridiculous, gorgeous blue eyes that reminded him of inland spring mornings when the mist from the crops rose into the clear sky. "Thank you," Adele finally said. "Now that I realize who the sheriff is, I guess I'm a little less worried about what he would have done, but I'm glad for your help anyway."
We have to talk about this."
"Keep fighting for it, Nate." He could hear Hugh's voice in his ear. Why had Hugh wanted him to fight the girls for the property? Was that really what he meant? Hadn't he been able to see how that would go? What if he had? What if Hugh had had this in mind the whole time, getting Nate hooked on one of the girls? He wouldn't have been so cruel, would he? Adele looked at the front door as if hoping someone, anyone, would enter. She wanted a distraction, obviously. So he'd oblige, although he wasn't sure until he spoke whether he'd oblige with a kiss or an argument. Fight won, though he regretted the lost kiss.
"You're not fit to run this place."
As openings for important conversations went, this one left something to be desired. "Just because I was a little off my game doesn't mean I'm not fit," she countered. "It's not like I have any practice at it, and you didn't show up, leaving me to figure out every damn thing myself. I didn't even know where you hid the money until I remembered my uncle's floor safe." Apparently she'd remembered his combination, too. DB123. Not that hard when it came right down to it.
"Did you start the ice machine?"
She looked startled and glanced over her shoulder at the ice beast. "I thought it would just kick on when it got low."
"I bet it's low now."
Adele glared at him. "Do you know how small a thing that is? Learnable, all of those little things." If she had someone to teach her. He wasn't going to be that guy. But making her bristle wasn't going to do any good. It was pointless, and if he were her, it would just make him dig in his heels even deeper. He drew his stool even closer to the bar, 4 inches closer to her, on the other side. He smoothed his features. This was important. It was so important.
"Look, you'd be an amazing bartender. I know that. But it's more than that, isn't it?"
Her eyes betrayed skepticism. "What do you mean?" The jukebox finally changed, swinging into Patsy Cline's Walking After Midnight.
"What about the money?"
"What about it?" Her chin was up, challenging him.
"If you sell to me, you and your sisters walk away with cash."
"Probably not that much cash. This place is run into the ground." That was the whole point. That was why he could afford it.
"What about your home, Nashville?"
"I told you, this is home."
"What about your apartment?"
Belatedly, he remembered she'd told him she'd been evicted. "Homeless. I'm itinerant." She crossed her arms. "That makes this place a whole lot more attractive."
"What about your friends? I'm sure you have some girlfriends you miss like hell."
She picked up a napkin and folded it into a small square. "Of course I do, but they're all either getting married or having babies or both."
"So?"
"It's different for women. Husbands get in the way. Once a woman is married, she says she'll stay in touch with her friends, but when that first baby comes along, she forgets about her babyless friends totally, like nothing existed before she gave birth. All she can talk about are her children, and every conversation revolves around her kid. She unfolded the napkin, smoothing it against the top of the bar, as if she could get rid of the wrinkles. He stuck his hand in his pocket and gripped his mother's 2-month chip. It was worn smooth from his rubbing it, and warm from being against his body. He kept his voice casual. You don't want kids? Of course I do. Her smile was 100 watts. More. But only when it's right. The relief he felt was unwelcome. How are you planning on keeping yourself from turning into one of those women? Oh, I'm not. I plan on going whole hog baby crazy. I probably won't even speak to strangers on the street until I've deemed them worthy of hearing my baby stories. I'll be the worst of them all. Was your mom like that? It had started out as a ploy, a plot to convince her to give up the idea of keeping the golden spike. But now, for some reason, he had to know what she might be like as a mother. Nothing like mine. No, actually. She was more shy than she would have liked. It was my dad who was friends with everyone. With the grocer and the big music producers. You know the ones. He shook his head. I know the grocers, not the producers. I play guitar in a band whose biggest crowd was when we played Homecoming a few years back. She flashed him a quick smile. There's a type of music producer who never marries and never has kids. He dates women who get progressively younger and prettier, and my mother always said it wasn't their fault. The producers are kind of like gods, and pretty girls are placed on their altars. My point is, Dad was friends with them. Buzz Holden and T. Jones Barkley, they practically lived at our house when they were between girlfriends. They loved my mom, too, but she was a little harder to know. Postpartum never really let her go, I think. Does that scare you? Nate could see her way too clearly. A baby on her hip, opening a screen door to let friends inside. For 1 second, he saw himself in the backyard, firing up the barbecue, putting the beers on ice. Shit, this was crazy. Adele had taken a second to think about it. No, Mom and I were so different in so many ways. What about your sisters? Do they have kids yet? Adele laughed. No way. Neither of them could afford a baby. He kept his voice gentle while he went in for the kill. Wouldn't the money from the sale of the golden spike help them? What did they say when you asked? She stared over his shoulder, but didn't respond. It was all the answer he needed. Why would you want to be tied down to this place anyway? You could always come visit and keep it as your home base. We could write that into the sale that all 3 of you can stay for free whenever you wanted to. If there was someone in the room you wanted, I'd kick them out. Just like that. Her voice was small, and something about the way she'd tucked her head made him desperate to chew right through the wood of the bar to get to her, to fold her into his arms. But he just said, yeah, why tie yourself down? You're young, you could go anywhere. Why strap yourself to this place? Adele's head rose, and she met his gaze, her eyebrows drawing together. Wait, why tie yourself down? You still never tell me why this place is so important to you. Yeah, I did. Uncle Hugh, I know, you said that, but I'm not buying that's all there is to it. There's something more, I can feel it. She didn't deserve to know about his mother. I'm just saying, working this place is like being married with none of the benefits. Since you died, I haven't had a day off until today. And yet you're here. And yet I'm here. Why? You're the damn reason. He didn't say the words out loud, but it seemed like maybe she heard him clear enough. Her cheeks went bright pink, and she reached for one of the dirty glasses lined up on the bar, waiting to be washed. She started washing it in the sink right in front of him, and every damn time she moved the glass under the running water, she had to lean forward enough that her t-shirt gaped. Just a little. Not like he could even see the top of her bra cup. Just skin, just soft, smooth, glorious skin that he could practically taste. You're doing it wrong, he rasped. She narrowed her eyes but didn't respond. No, seriously. He stood and moved finally around to the back of the bar, where he belonged, where his feet hit the floor. This is the wash sink. Fill it like this and add this soap and disinfectant. This is the rinse sink. He took another glass and dunked it, twisting it. hitting it with the soaked wash rag and then pushed it in and out of the rinse water.
Fast, done, see?
I see, she said. They both froze in place, side to side, both their hands near the soapy water. The heat from the sink rose, practically making wavy lines in the air. Or was the warmth coming from her? He half turned and his knee touched her leg. He waited for her to move away. She didn't. Only 5 or 6 inches separated their torsos. She had to move away because God knew he'd never be able to. It was an actual physical impossibility, like plucking protons from neutrons by hand. Adele took a quick breath, so short he almost didn't hear it.
You should let me buy the saloon from you.
He moved his hand so that the back of it touched the back of hers.
Please.
Still, she didn't answer. He turned his head. Her cheek was right there, so close he could almost... Then she turned her head, too. Their lips were a breath apart. And there was nothing in the whole world that could keep him from kissing her. Fast and hard, he wrapped an arm behind her back and drew her full length against him. His mouth was hot against hers, and the way she gasped against his lips told him everything he needed to know. He put his other hand behind her neck and pulled her tighter against him. Her tongue was as insistent as his was, and she drove herself forward. Her fingers tangled in his hair and then gripped his shoulders.
Let me buy the saloon.
He would stop kissing her, of course, as soon as she asked him to, as soon as she stopped tugging at his belt. But for now, he kissed her more. And Lord in heaven, the woman kissed him back. Finally, he felt her say something against his lips. Why?
Because you feel perfect.
Everything about her was perfect. Her lips, her breasts, the way her ass fit, cupped in his hands. She gave a small laugh, and the kiss went carbonated. Why do you want the bar? He honestly couldn't remember.
Because.
And you get whatever you want.
Yes.
It was a lie, one he wished were true, because right now all he wanted was her. She looked over her shoulder at the front door. Anyone could come in.
Anyone could.
Though they probably wouldn't. This time of day there was always a lull between afternoon drinkers and evening socializers.
That open sign says closed on the back, you know.
Surprise flashed in her eyes. We couldn't.
The place is empty, likely to stay that way.
Not like it'll hurt the rock bottom line if we close up for a minute. He walked to the front, praying to every god there was she wouldn't change her mind, her gorgeous mind, which matched every other asset on her. He flipped the sign and shot the front lock. Rock bottom line. That would make a good song title. Her words sounded nervous.
Inventory.
He paced back towards her, step by invisible step.
In the back room, we should definitely check the stock levels, you think?
Adele nodded, then bit her lip. She leaned against a bar stool as if she were drunk, and he knew she hadn't had a drop. Inventory, she said. It's just good business.
Holy shit, man, you're so far over your head.
Adele. He kissed her again and tried to tell her how much he needed her with just that touch. Oh, Loretta Lynn. Their kiss never broke as they made their way into the storeroom. Nate closed the door with one hand behind his back as his other hand undid the buttons of her fly. She pulled at his belt, seeming as impatient as he was. Nate hadn't had sex in a storeroom since he'd lost his virginity to the cashier at the Stop and Shop in Fresno. That time had been fast and fumbled, awkward and apologetic. This time, with Adele? He was shocked that the heat rising off their half-clothed bodies didn't make the bottles of liquor spontaneously combust. The gin could have exploded, the vodka could have gone up like a propane tank on fire, and they wouldn't have noticed. What about... He dug in his wallet and pulled out a condom.
The guy doesn't always have his guitar with him.
Gratifyingly, she laughed. Nate thought he could probably fly. Then the condom was on, and instead of going slowly like they had the last time, just last night, she jumped up and sat on a stack of 7-Up boxes, wrapping a leg around his waist. Now, she said, and then he was in her, hot and slick and fast, fucking her so hard he had to hold on to the metal shelf behind her. So fast her gasps against his ear sounded like his own, and maybe they shared the same breath. Now, now, now. Now was the only time in the world. There were only the two of them. Adele leaned forward and bit his shoulder so sharply he knew she'd leave teeth marks. He repaid her by biting her lower lip and thrusting into her harder. He pushed his hand between them, pressing his thumb against her clit. She let out a curse, a real one, not a country singer's name, and ground herself against him. She tucked her forehead against the curve of his shoulder and wrapped her arm around his lower back. And Nate realized he'd never needed release more than that moment, and he needed release in her, and basically there was probably nothing he'd ever want as much as her. And while she whispered his name in a strangled voice against his skin, he came, and he felt her coming around him. And then he had to wrap his arms around her to keep from falling to the floor. Blood pounded in his ears, and black spots danced in the corners of his vision. "Jesus," he finally said. And she laughed. Adele laughed, a peal of delight. And Nate, at that moment, at the pretty bird-like trill of it, fell in love like he'd fallen off a cliff. Chapter 34. What had she done? Adele lifted her hands to her cheeks and laughed again. She just fucked Nate in the storeroom of Uncle Hugh's saloon. Jesus and Reba McEntire. She'd never felt as bad girl as she did at that moment. And she'd certainly never felt as sexy as she did, seeing herself in his eyes. They should probably at least pull up their jeans. The front door was locked. She'd seen him do it. But then again, there could have been someone out there making margaritas in the blender and she wouldn't have noticed. Lord. His voice was low at her ear, and there was a richness to it she hadn't heard before. Then Nate kissed her. And it was different. Last night, his kiss had been hot. When they'd launched themselves at the storeroom, their mouths had been an inferno. This kiss was something else. It was something gorgeous and terrifying and so many million times more disturbing than just a hot kiss. Adele couldn't be falling for this guy. No way. She was going to be his boss. Technically, she was already. You didn't fall for an employee. For that matter, she had no intention of falling for anyone anytime soon. Why, then, did it feel like it was too late? Had her heart fallen like a wounded robin plummeting to earth without giving her any kind of fair warning at all? How was she supposed to fix this? Adele buttoned up her jeans. She smoothed her hair. She rubbed her eyes. The whole time, even while he was clipping his belt buckle back into place with a clank, Nate was looking at her with a heat she couldn't quite name. Adele just knew one thing for sure. She was in trouble. Big trouble. So, that was, how was she supposed to finish that sentence? There wasn't really an adjective that was appropriate. Fucking amazing would have worked, but she seemed to have lost the ability to swear again. Adele, Nate started. I have to get back out there. She pulled on her shirt, which had somehow landed on the concrete floor and bore the distinct impression of Nate's boot print. In case, I mean, you're not at work today. It's all me. It's all you, he said, but his words made them sound very, very different. She poked her head out into the main room. Still no one. Thank God. Norma hadn't let herself back in with the key. No one had broken in. She opened the door, and the room stood empty, the ocean-scented wind the only thing occupying the bar stools. We got away with it, she said, the laugh creeping back into her voice. She couldn't quite push down the hiccuping giggles, and she wanted nothing as much as to lock up the saloon for the rest of the night and take Nate back to her room and start everything all over again. And again, and again. There were still things to talk about, though, things to talk through. So she walked to the front and flipped the sign back to open. Then she set herself on a bar stool on the customer side, fitting her hands between her knees. So, she knew the shape and weight of him. She knew how the underside of his tongue tasted. More than that, she knew how he rested against her, his cheek next to hers, his breath in her ear. How was she supposed to just talk with him? He sat next to her, his boot heel propped on the lower rung of her stool. Yep. I wonder if that's ever been done back there before. she said before she thought it through. If Nate had done that in the same spot, she honestly didn't want to know. Don't answer, she said at the same time as he said, not by me. What does that mean?
Nothing,
He said. To my uncle? No, please don't answer that.
I won't.
His grin was as wide as the Pacific. Oh, God, that means he did.
My lips are sealed.
Adele gave a sharp laugh. Oh, my God. What if it was that bartender of his? Old, what's her name? Can you imagine? Nate's eyes narrowed. Ignoring the voice that had told her not to keep speaking, Adele said, but he wouldn't, would he? Not someone like her.
What does that mean?
Well, come on. I think my uncle would have had better taste than that. She was nice and all with that big belly laugh she had, but she probably slept with anyone who would buy her a drink. There had been a sometime employee at a friend's bar in Nashville, Allison, who'd brought in her boyfriends proudly when she had them. But when Allison was single, she shimmied her crotch against any man that would put up with it in the hopes of getting a gin and tonic for free. Uncle Hugh liked to save people, but I don't think even he would stoop to messing around with a boozer like her. Nate's face twisted as if she'd just insulted a member of his family. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't really know her. I guess you did.
Whatever.
He dropped his hand flat against the top of the bar, a dull thunk.
My beer's warm now. Can you get me another?
The words felt like a slap, and Adele slipped off the stool. She needed her feet below her, strong on the wooden boards her great-grandfather had put in by hand. Sure.
Thanks.
His chin jutted forward, and his eyes were clear lakes of frigid anger. Are you mad at me now? What had she missed?
Nah, just thirsty.
Adele pulled another pseudo-black and tan and set it carefully on the bar in front of him. He kept his eyes on the old wood, his brows drawn together, his expression stormy. I'm sorry, what did I do? He snorted. Are you punishing me for having sex with you? Because screw you if that's it. The words hurt.
I already did that. Now I want the chaser.
He took a loud sip.
Yeah, that hits the spot.
Adele's heart quailed. She could have sworn he had just felt that they'd just had a connection, a real one. Is this about us selling to you?
Well,
he drawled insolently.
I knew it would cost me more than a lay. I'm prepared to write the check, too.
Nate.
Or will I have to fuck your sisters, too? Is that part of the deal?
What the hell is wrong with you? Her sisters. Her sisters who were farther away from her than ever.
You didn't think there was anything wrong with me a few minutes ago when I was so far inside you that...
You're fired. The words were instant and irrevocable. He stood then, drawing himself up to his full height. Adele's heart quickened and her hands curled into fists.
You want to run that past me one more time?
His voice was so quiet she almost couldn't hear it under the low whir of the fan blade overhead. You're... Her voice broke and she started again. You're fired. Could a heart break just like that? A huge part of her, the majority of her body and mind, wanted to apologize, wanted to take it back. But he apparently thought she owed him something. Was that what this was about? Even worse, maybe he thought he had to fuck her to make the purchase go through. She was, what did they call it? That contingency. Maybe she was a nice one. He certainly hadn't had much problem doing it. The heat was real, she knew that much. But the motivation, the deeper, scarier, lovely longing she thought she'd seen in his eyes, tasted on his breath, felt in his touch, wasn't real. It wasn't even close to real. Leave your keys on the counter. She turned her back on him and opened the till, even though she had no reason to do so. She pulled out the ones and started counting them. She lost track completely after 7, so she just straightened them, unfolding creased corners and facing them all the same direction. From behind her, she heard keys slam onto the bar top. Then his footsteps, heavy, thumping through the bar. The swinging door creaked furiously and the iron security door banged shut with a thunderclap. Adele had thought she was just falling. She had thought there was time to arrest her descent. But it seemed like maybe she was too late. And it turned out there was a place even lower than the bottom. Chapter 35. The rest of the night was horrible. No, that wasn't it. A horrible night in a bar, Adele knew from past experience, was one in which you had to sing in front of people eating dollar hot dogs, too drunk to care about the act on the stage, besides yelling lewd and usually physically impossible suggestions every once in a while. Tonight wasn't like that. She was stone cold sober, for one thing. She'd seen drunk bartenders before. The old red-haired one jumped to mind. But Adele knew that if she were even a little bit tipsy, she wouldn't be able to do a single thing right, and as it was, she was getting enough wrong already. She'd slung a cherry into a gin martini and an olive into a Tom Collins. One of the beer taps was clogged, and the sink appeared to be backing up. And if one more person asked her where Nate was, she might throw something. There were plenty of good things to choose from. Small shot glasses would hit the floor like a tiny detonation. Bigger rocks glasses would quiet the whole packed bar. The packed bar. Where had all these people come from? Adele wasn't naive. This was her town, after all. She knew that a Monday night in September should have been one of the slowest nights in the bar's history. She'd been counting on it. A drinker or two, sure. She'd planned on being professional and then running to the back room to cry before the next one came in. But the place was freaking packed with bodies. And she wasn't imagining it. People were staring at her. She knew the weight of that gaze, and she was wilting under it. She'd caught two ranchers openly whispering about whether she was staying in town or out in the new hotel up the highway. She didn't react to topping off their water glasses with what she hoped was a chipper smile. It felt more chipped than chipper, though. It wasn't even like she could go hide in the storeroom. She'd be lucky if she was ever able to make herself go into that room again. The space in there was too full to fit her into it, full of the image of him over her, the way his eyes had burned into her own, the way he'd felt inside her, the words she thought he'd said with his eyes. She thought they'd been talking about love. Stupid, stupid Adele. Donna. That had been the old bartender's name, she finally remembered. At midnight, the jukebox, which she'd very carefully queued up to play the good stuff, Hank and Dolly and Johnny, suddenly lurched into a Songbird tune. Wait till your father gets home. Just a little longer now. It was the song that had played earlier, a song that would always break her heart into a million pieces. Earlier, while working on the jukebox's programming, she'd tried to delete the song entirely, but she hadn't been able to figure it out. Why, in a town like Darling Bay, did they have a damn new-fangled digital jukebox? It wasn't right. I swear to the moon above, he'll be home soon, my love. The shot of brandy she'd been pouring into Pastor Jacob's glass landed on the top of the bar instead. You all right? Adele didn't care. Who put this on? No one answered her, so she raised her voice. I'm serious. Who put this album on? Shuffle, maybe. The rancher who answered rubbed a finger alongside his nose. No, someone put this song on purpose. She said it as if it were against the law. No one, except the startled pastor in front of her, seemed to take her sudden release of emotion seriously. Instead, God damn it, most of them seemed to be singing along. Heads nodded, and a low murmur rose at the chorus. Good God in heaven. They really were singing. Wait till your father gets home. Wait a little longer. For one moment, Adele's heart felt as if it had become a red paper one, carefully cut out for a Valentine's Day gift for someone who wouldn't care, who would take pleasure in ripping it up. The pieces fluttered to the floor, leaving nothing but an empty space in her chest. The emptiness made it a whole hell of a lot easier to reach behind the jukebox and yank out the cord. Voices continued for a moment, as if it were an a cappella part of the song, but they stopped, one by one, when they caught sight of Adele's face. She climbed up to kneel on the bar stool that leaned drunkenly against the jukebox. Closing time. Sorry, y'all. A man who'd been drinking doubles all night slurred. Last call's what you mean, honey. You don't just get it close. Adele stared at him. Then she channeled Hugh on a grumpy night and jumped down from the stool. She stalked to the man who stank of bourbon and nicotine from the cigarettes he'd been smoking on the front porch between drinks. She picked up his glass, still half full. Hey, paid for that, honey. He pawed comically in the air, nowhere near the glass. Yeah, you did. Adele pushed open the half door, motioning him outside. Why don't you have another smoke? Well, the man wobbled, then patted his shirt pocket, digging out his cigarettes with a hooked finger. Good idea. Adele tossed the liquid out so far that it half landed on the edge of the porch, and the rest wetted the parking spot in front. There's your drink. Enjoy.
You little, why, I oughta. The man bobbed a bit, his knees doing a slow but repetitive buckle. Adele turned to face him. The guy had been a jerk all night, hadn't left even a single dollar for a tip. She'd relish the chance to call the cops on him for drunk and disorderly. Carefully placing her hands on her hips, she faced him. You oughta what? I, I'm, Get the hell out of my bar. It felt good. It felt right. And Lord, she missed Uncle Hugh. The man lurched sideways, aiming his footsteps off the porch and right into the traffic lanes. Luckily, it was Monday night at midnight in Darling Bay, and the street was empty. Not very wishable. Adele could almost see him coming up with his next thrown barb. I'm gonna tell Nate on you when he's back. He'll show you what's what, all right. Finally back on the sidewalk, the drunk tilted southward, stumbling as he went. Nate wouldn't be back. A spike of something horrible and cold shot up her spine. She could feel the other customers clustered at the window and the door, and sure enough, she had to push her way through to get back inside. Show's over, she said. Everyone out. This time no one argued with her, and no one met her eye as they shuffled out the front door. That was the worst part of all. Most of the people leaving weren't impaired. They weren't over the limit. They'd just been hanging out with friends, spending time in the bar because this was Darling Bay, and a new bartender firing the old one was literally the most interesting thing to happen since the library had gotten a new card catalog system. As the half door swung closed behind the last silent person, Adele pulled the iron door shut. The click was unsatisfying, and she shot the deadbolt home, trying hard not to remember when Nate had bolted it earlier in the day, just for those few stolen moments. She went into the middle of the wooden dance floor. She sat, cross-legged. Then she flopped backward and looked up into the rafters. Even more cobwebs up there. With her luck, they were strung by brown recluses and black widows. And even though she'd unplugged the jukebox, the song kept playing in her head, as clearly as if she were in the recording booth. As her sister's remembered voices filled her ears, she cried the way she'd wanted to since Nate had left. I swear to the moon above, you'll be home soon, my love. When Adele was young, she and her sisters had ridden bikes all over Darling Bay, up the hills and into Radiant Valley on the other side. The best ride had been straight up Devil's Mound. It felt like a mountain to them. Now Adele realized it was barely a hill. The path had been rocky, strewn with blackberry brambles that threatened to choke closed the narrower parts of the path. Every single time, one or more of the girls got a flat tire. Adele loved it when they did. Such an easy fix, so simple and satisfying. While whichever sister it was sat on the side of the dirt path, making a necklace out of pine needles or daisy stems, complaining because of the heat or the wind or the fog, Adele got to work with her patch kit. She'd gotten so good she could patch a tire and reinflate it in under 3 minutes. It had been like a game. Now, sitting on the dance floor under the cobwebs, tears leaked from her eyes like the patch she'd applied hadn't held. There was no glue strong enough to stick her back together. The things that were simple when they were children weren't simple anymore. Okay, that wasn't totally true, she thought on a hiccup. She bet she could still patch a tire, if not in 3 minutes, then pretty dang quickly. But the rest of it, no sisters, no Nate, nothing but this falling down shell of a building. The hotel and cafe that needed to be gutted, which was exactly the way she felt. Adele gave one last hollow sob as the song ended in her mind. Then she stood, slowly. She did the closing things that made sense to her to do. She washed everything. She mopped. She counted the money, all $600 of it. Whatever she'd forgotten, she could do in the morning. For now, she'd satisfy herself by turning out the lights and locking the door behind her. She turned off the white lights in the courtyard, and without the way they lit the fog, the back porch just looked sad, lonely. Then, without asking herself why she did it, she peeked into each room. The rooms 3, 4, and 5 all smelled like they should be opened up and aired out for weeks, maybe years. Rooms 6, 7, and 8 were so damp that she knew they'd need to tear open the walls. Rooms 9, 10, and 11 were as open as they could be to the elements, covered only by the flapping blue tarps overhead. It was overwhelming, completely and utterly. And what was she looking for, anyway? Ghosts? Vagrants? Old Western haunts, having one last romp at the old hotel? No. Nate. She was looking for him. And damn it, the realization pissed her off. But Adele wouldn't cry. That time of the night was over, and she was firmly committed now to being strong. Totally strong. She could do this. She had this. It lasted until she opened the door of room 12. Inside, the ceiling still stood open to the stars, waiting on a new roof. But there was something new. A sleeping bag carefully laid out on a mat. One pillow. And Nate's guitar, the one he'd played on stage 11 days before. Nothing else. Nate? Her heart in her throat, she flipped the light switch and was surprised, ridiculously so, when nothing happened. Are you in here? Of course he wasn't. But he had been. He'd been sleeping here. It didn't make sense. Adele's brain felt like she'd been on board a boat all day, wobbly and confused to be standing on land. Her legs shook. But he was the one who was supposed to be on a boat, right? Living on board? That's what he'd told her when he'd given her his room. She backed out, slowly, pulling the door all the way shut, and ran to her room as quietly as she could. One more night in it. One more night before Hugh's apartment was livable. Maybe if she stayed flat on her back and faced the ceiling all night, maybe then she wouldn't risk smelling him in the sheets. Maybe then she could keep herself from falling apart. Chapter 36. I need a job. In the small white room which passed for the sheriff's office, Colin McMurdy looked more amused than anything else. It kind of felt like wiping the smirk off his face. Screw the fact that they were friends. What about the bar? I quit. You quit. The tone of the sheriff's voice implied he knew the difference between quitting and getting fired, and he knew which one had happened to Nate. Whatever. Yeah, I'm out of that place. I can't work for her. Who? Colin was acting dumb, something Nate couldn't stand anyone doing, let alone one of his best friends. Shut it. Just tell me how I start. Colin laughed and sat behind the big wooden desk, which took up most of the small space. He pointed at the red plastic chair on the other side of it. Sit down. I won't bust your ass anymore. What's going on? Nothing. Nate bent his neck sideways in a stretch. He'd stayed on Dixie's tiny couch last night, and there was no sleeping platform more uncomfortable in the whole wide world, he'd bet. He just hadn't been able to stomach the idea of hiding, really, on the Golden Spike property. Not for a minute longer. It's just, I guess I've got basically nothing left. The admission surprised him as much as it hurt. Kindness flickered in Colin's eyes. The bar. It's hers, theirs. Definitely not mine. So you quit. It was kind of him to say that. Yeah. So what are you going to do now? Are you even listening to me? That's why I'm here. I need a job. Nate, don't tell me I'm not qualified. I have a bachelor's degree in social work, which is about 4 more years education than any of your other deputies have. You want to be a deputy? I thought you meant like a clerk or something. Nate settled his feet firmly on the floor. Why the surprise? It's a good job. Probably pays a lot more than bartending, if John Sinclair's new house means anything. His mother owns the lumber mill. Still, Nate. Nate closed his eyes and drew air in through his nose. Soon this part would be over and he could just move forward with his life. His Adele-free life. What? This is not the job for you. How would you know that? I know. Colin leaned forward and picked up a pen. Without looking down, he doodled small, perfect squares on his calendar blotter. Look, you think you want to help people. Nate felt his cheeks heat as he watched the small squares, as if hypnotized. He wouldn't have said it out loud, not just like that, not to Colin, but yeah. If he couldn't take care of people at the bar, he'd damn well take care of them some other way. Being a police officer would let him do it, right? Helping old ladies cross the street, and there were a lot of old ladies in Darling Bay,
occasionally saving a woman's life from a shithead who wanted to hurt her. That would be just fine. He imagined a scowling scumbag towering over Adele in the bar, and anger lit the fuse that seemed to be perma-curled at the base of his neck. Adele should take a self-defense class if she was going to be at the bar late. Samantha Rowe taught some ass-kicking ones. Nate had never had a gun behind the bar, but maybe he should get her one. Tell her it was Hugh's, make her learn to use it. As if she would even talk to him. I do want to help people. Yeah, it sounded cheesy said aloud, too. Definitely not the right job for you, then. Damn it, man, stop messing with me. Nate's temper was frayed and getting thinner by the second. The knot in his throat wasn't helping anything. Colin drew a circle, and then another one, connecting them with an arrow before he responded. You want my job, then? Okay, any job. Put me on the desk. How about a meter maid? Put me in one of those three-wheeled car things. I'll write tickets all day until you promote me to officer. Go be a firefighter. Nate gave a hollow laugh. And run into burning buildings. I may want to help people, but I'm not crazy. Police don't help people. Come off it. I'm serious. Nate's annoyance meter crept into the red again. And so, it seemed, did Colin's. He flung the pen to the right, not even blinking when it hit the wall. You know how much I hate this job sometimes? Nate folded his arms over his chest. You can't tell me you don't help people. Sure I do. Sometimes. Most of the time, though, I'm just reacting to something I can't do a damn thing about. I'm trying to protect a little boy from his grandma who verbally abuses him so bad he's gonna need therapy by 18. Old people living in filth, refusing all offers of help. His knuckles went white. Or I'm going out yet again to the home of a woman who keeps bringing the guy who beats her back inside. Those guys kill their women eventually, or they smother their spirits forever. And the women don't listen. Colin gave a heavy sigh that made him sound older than his mid-30s. I can do that. You can what? Make them listen. Keep them from going back to the bad guys. Colin snorted. You don't actually believe that. Why not? How did talking your mom out of drinking go? Nate narrowed his eyes. Low blow, you ass. Alcoholism is a disease. It's exactly the same. It's you wanting a different outcome for someone else. What's wrong with that? Oh, my God. Colin sounded honestly shocked. You really don't get it, do you? Nate felt his neck get hotter. I can be talked down to in most other places in this town, you know? Colin leaned forward. You can't change anyone. Nate took off his ball cap. He punched into it as if it were a baseball mitt he was breaking in. I know. No, you don't. You really thought you could save your mom. I knew that. I thought she was your blind spot. But seems like she was just a symptom, huh? For a greater problem. Colin nodded in what seemed like satisfaction. And that's why you stay at the bar. I finally get it. But you have to listen to me. You can't change one damn person, ever. All you can do is be there to help pick up the pieces sometimes. That's about the best we get in this life. It turns out I like picking up those pieces, and I like tossing assholes who break things and people into jail and watching them wish they could change what they did. Occasionally, I hear an apology that matters, that means something. But besides that, we just have to let people do what they want to do. You really believe that? Nate resisted the urge to kick the wastebasket next to the door. He shoved his hat back onto his head. I do. If you believe that, then why would you try to change my mind on the topic? Colin had the grace to look surprised. Guess you're right. Are you okay? Yeah, lied Nate. I'll see you around. He turned, hitting his elbow on the doorframe in his haste. From the front office, he heard Sweetie Swenson say something to someone about a warrant. Somewhere, a window slammed shut. Hey, Nate. The sheriff's voice rose behind him. Your degree. Go see Peggy at APS. Nate just wanted out. What? Peggy Simon. She works for the city, runs our adult protective services. Surprise was a dull thud. We have that? In Darling Bay, we need that? You'd be surprised. Nate took a moment and mentally collated the elderly he personally kept an eye on. There had to be 10 of them, maybe 11. Colin shook his head. You're not taking care of all of them, buddy. It might feel like you are, but you're not. You're barely scraping the surface.
There are plenty of elderly who can't get out of their houses even to get into their gardens, let alone make it to the bar to socialize. Go talk to Peggy. Tell her I sent you." Fine. If moods could be seen, his would be blacker than sin, with dark red anger radiating at the edges. But Colin was trying, Nate could tell. "Thanks, I guess. And remember, you can't save anyone. Not even her." Everyone. He could at least try to save everyone. And he refused to admit that he knew who Colin was talking about, because he wasn't thinking about Adele. Not for 1 second. "No one," reiterated Colin. "No matter how pretty she is or how blue her eyes are. You can help them, sure, if they want it, and if they're willing to accept your help, but that's it." The starkness of it was terrifying, and Nate hated it. Hell if he'd show Colin that, though. "You're a pain in the ass, and you're wrong. Just think about it. Screw you." Colin laughed. "Yeah, well, what are friends for?" Nate, walking out into the sunshine in front of the police department, was so irritated it felt like he could pull his own skin off. The saloon had been the only place he'd ever imagined himself helping people. He'd found his way there, and he hadn't planned on leaving it. He had never thought about where he would go, what he would do without the bar, without the patrons he took care of. But Colin might be right. Maybe there was a place in the world he could do more, a place he could do better. The image of Adele's face, bright with laughter and hope, filled his mind. Maybe he'd hidden behind that swinging half door for too long. Chapter 37. Adele spent the morning fixing the porch swing in front of room 1. It was a minor job, handled by an hour's worth of work, the use of Uncle Hugh's toolbox, and $30 spent at the hardware store. When the swing's chains were rehung into a beam that looked 10 times more solid than the one it had thunked out of, she was covered in sweat and had regained the smallest feeling of control. She sat, dialed her sister, and promptly lost that feeling. "What?" "Don't hang up." Adele could hear the groan that Molly stifled. "I don't have time for this." "You're on a cruise ship. You have time." "They have time. The customers have time. I have a job, something you forget constantly." She did. Nerves swam in the pit of her stomach and her mouth went dry. "I'm sorry." "I know, you always say that." "And it's not enough." "Seriously, Adele, I do not have the bandwidth for this today." Adele kicked her legs too hard and the swing gave a massive groan. Wind ruffled the edges of the rose petals, stripping some into the air. Fall was almost here. "You were right. You were always right." Molly's voice was guarded. "What?" "I shouldn't have made us go up on stage that night. I shouldn't have finished singing. I shouldn't have apologized to the crowd. Adele, your reaction was the right one." "I fainted. I hit my head and came up bleeding. It was not a good reaction." "And I kept singing." "You've apologized before. I know you're sorry." "I was sorry for the wrong thing. I said I was sorry it happened. I was sorry that we didn't finish the tour, that you hit your head. But I never said you were right, and that I was wrong. And I'm sorry that I thought I knew better than both of you. I can't imagine how painful that was." There was a pause, full and heavy. Adele held her breath. Yeah, it was painful." "I'm sorry," said Adele again. She'd keep saying it. She'd keep meaning it. "I thought you'd never figure out why we were so hurt. We needed to be alone, together, the three of us. Instead, you put us in front of the whole world. I don't know why it took me so long." "Well, damn." Molly sounded exhausted. "It was a long time ago. We've all moved on." "That's the problem." The words felt jagged. "Moving on is good. It's what we needed to do. But I miss my sisters." Another long pause. "Well, what?" "I think I'm about to get fired." "What happened?" "The cruise line changed hands. Rumors are letting everyone go and picking up new crew in Indonesia." Hope beat frantically inside Adele's chest. The biggest, yellowest rose nodded in the wind in front of her.
Fly home. Adele, please. Everything hung on the space between them. The line pulled so tight it almost felt like a cord. I'll think about it. Oh, God, yes. Please think about it. It would do for now. How's the bartender? The words tumbled out in a jumble with small plastic clicks, like the sorry pieces made against each other on the game board. I'm in love with him. She touched the blue piece, the broken one that she put in her pocket every day. Oh, honey. And I hurt him really badly. She'd taken his bar away. Well, did he hurt you? The question surprised her. Yes. He thought so little of her that he'd hoped a roll in the hay would be part of a business transaction. So, apologize. Move on. It's not that easy. Molly's voice was so soft Adele could almost not hear her. Sometimes it is. It can be. Just accept him. Like you should have done with us. Adele cleared her throat, suddenly thick with emotion. Do you have Lana's address? Oh, come on. She told me not to give it to you. I promise you I won't hound her. I've just found something here I want to send her. She touched the sorry piece. Dot Rillo would have wrapping paper at the post office. What was Nate doing? How had the man gotten so firmly into her blood that he felt like a need as essential as water or air? She shook her head. First things first. She would take the photo she'd found to the art supply store, see if they could blow it up. Rush order. She'd buy a frame for the picture, and then she'd hang it where all could see. She'd buy wrapping paper for the sorry piece. She would focus on that. She'd only need a little bit of paper, a stamp, and an envelope. And a whole lot of hope. Chapter 38. Adele had been worried Dixie would be hard to find, but it turned out there was only one mobile home park in Darling Bay. All she had to do was ask Dot Rillo at the post office, and she had her fill of not only directions, but a whole litany of what the postal worker thought about Dixie. You know, she's not a local. Not like you are, dear, but she's just fine, in spite of that. In the Christmastown pageant last year, she played a sheep for all she was worth. She had the best boss of anyone. Adele and her sisters had spent at least 4 or 5 Christmases in town when they were young. Isn't that a kid's part? Dot looked at her in surprise. The children need a good role model, of course. How else would they know how to be sheep? Okay, then. Adele waved the map Dot had drawn on a change of address form. Thank you for this. Any time. Tell her I have a box from Amazon here, and I think it feels like candles. All right. And tell her to order the bayberry scented ones next time. I'm allergic to vanilla. It's been making me sneeze. At the mobile home park, sure enough, there was only one pink and silver trailer in the whole place. And instead of appearing tawdry, the place looked adorable. 2 tall plastic flamingos were stuck into a potted palm, and wind chimes danced. In every window, bits of color shone. The postmaster had mentioned Dixie was a stained glass artist, and here was the evidence of that. Dixie popped out the door at the knock. Madge, I told you. Oh, crap. She gave a puny cough. Sorry, excuse me. She rubbed her throat and pulled at the front of her yellow banana-printed pajamas. This cold, you know. You're not in trouble. Dixie came all the way out and stood with Adele on the small circle of fake green grass. Are you sure? Adele nodded. Sure. Because it wasn't really. Dixie clammed up. Your idea? I know. It was his. He's why I'm here. Adele couldn't quite bring herself to say his name. Nate. Coffee? Dixie looked up at the sky. Look at that. I'm up before noon. I wouldn't say no. Sit. Dixie gestured to a pink plastic table with matching chairs under a palm frond awning. I'll be right out. The coffee Dixie made was hot and strong. It reminded Adele of the coffee Molly made. They used to tease her about her coffee being able to strip paint and clean silver. The back of Adele's throat ached. Maybe she was catching Dixie's non-existent cold. So, what do you need to know? Adele took another sip. Great coffee. Thank you. And I know this isn't a social call. What's up? It could be a social call. Dixie nodded slowly, suspicion in her eyes. Sure, most of my friends call or text before they come over, though.
When they just drop out of the sky at the crack of dawn? It's after 9. Oh, God, it's that early? I just went to bed. Dixie held her ceramic mug like she wanted to hug it. So, if you're not here to fire me too, then you heard that you fired Nate? Of course I did. Oh, God. Come on. You know there's no one in town who doesn't know. Postmaster didn't seem to know. Dixie's eyes widened. She tweeted about it. That Rillo put it on Twitter? Of course. Does Nate know that? Dixie shook her head and her short curls bounced. I doubt Nate even knows what Twitter is. Just the sound of his name made something hurt in Adele's chest. Was she too young to have a heart attack? It ran in the family, after all. Wasn't this the way they started? With a dull ache in the chest, followed by a foggy feeling of confusion? A deep well of sadness? That was totally medical. She knew it. Can you tell me where he docks his boat? Sorry? Dixie blinked and stirred her coffee lazily. His boat, the one he's been living on, is it at the main marina? What's it called? She would go find it, and then she'd come up with a plan. He doesn't have a boat. Yes, he does. Adele heard the ludicrousness of her words, as if she knew more about Nate than Dixie did. He told me he's been staying on it while I'm in his room. Yeah, well, he lied to you. He never had a boat? Oh, sure. Dixie smiled. He had one. He loved that thing. But the bank turned him down the last time he applied for a pre-approved loan, saying it was too old a boat to be counted on as security. It was just a liability. So he sold it to Ruth Ann, and she put it in dry dock. She lives on it with her dog. If you want to see it, it's just over there on the other side of the gazebo. That big white yacht is mostly hiding it, but it's right behind it. A seagull swooped down and perched on the edge of the pink table, making it rock. Adele's coffee spilled. Oh, sorry. Shoo, you vile thing. And even though Adele knew Dixie was talking to the bird, for a moment she really did feel vile. When? When did he sell the boat? Oh, maybe 5 months ago. Yeah, the loan got pre-approved just before summer. I remember because we were hanging new white lights in the arbor, taking down the strands that committed suicide over the winter. So he was never staying there. Dixie tilted her head. Probably not. He lied. To make you feel better, he probably did. He does that. Adele rubbed her hands against each other. The sunlight was warm on her shoulders, but she felt chilled to the bone. Well, he shouldn't. Yeah, well, he takes care of people. If it hadn't been you he put in his room, it would have been someone else. Heck, you put me in there when we first met, though back then he was still sleeping on his boat. Why does he do it? Put people in his room at the hotel? Because he could, I guess. Probably goes back to his mother. What do you mean? Something prickled at the back of Adele's neck. You know, him taking care of her for so long. His mother? You knew her, didn't you? Adele shook her head. I don't think so. How would I have known her? He's from Fresno, right? Somewhere around there? Donna. The inside of Adele's brain went quiet. Who? The bartender. You knew that was his mom, right? Adele covered her mouth with her fingers. Oh, God. A lot of people didn't know that, but I thought you would have. Why wouldn't he tell me? Dixie shrugged. He didn't really tell anyone. He was embarrassed. No, that's the weird thing. Hugh told me Donna made him swear not to tell people, not till she was sober. But Dixie raised her mug as if in salute. And she never got sober. She went a couple of months a few times, I think. Hugh said she had a whole 6-month plan, that if she could stay dry for half a year, she'd believe she'd really done it, and then Nate could brag to everyone who she was. She wanted to have a big party. She said she needed to make them believe in her. But she was wrong about that. You don't think Nate believed she'd quit? No, the opposite. She had 2 people who totally believed in her, both Nate and Hugh. I don't understand. Family is family. I don't understand how he could keep that a secret. Donna wanted him to be proud of her, and she was even more stubborn than he is. It was her plan. Dixie kicked her feet up on an empty chair, and she wouldn't budge from it. How did you know, then? He told you? Nah, I overheard Hugh talking to him one night. He believed that she would quit drinking. Adele remembered that she'd never seen a woman pack away more alcohol and stay on her feet. She remembered how Donna had smelled the next morning when she came wobbling into work and Uncle Hugh sent her up to his place for a nap and a shower. Why? Why on earth would he believe that would ever happen? Because Nate believes in people. That's what he does. I told him she probably slept with men for drinks. Dixie's mouth formed a perfect shocked O. Adele put her forehead briefly on top of the pink plastic tabletop. I know, she mumbled to her shoes. And then I fired him. Hoo-hoo, boy. That's a shitstorm right there. How are you doing? It was how Dixie said it that made Adele lift her head. Dixie's voice was kind, soft. She was listening. It felt so good to be listened to by someone who looked as if she cared. Adele couldn't have stopped the words from tumbling out of her mouth if she'd tried. I'm so mad at him. What did he do? It didn't feel hard to admit the truth to Dixie. He thought because I slept with him that meant I'd sell to him, or that I was thinking about it, that he would get me to reconsider. Dixie laughed. With the power of his cock? Oh, that's good. You can't laugh at that. It seemed to make Dixie laugh more. Oh, yes, I can. That's hilarious. How is it funny? Because I've always said that sex ruins everything, especially business. And trust me, I have experience with this. So he thought y'all were going to be celebrating the close of the deal? I think so. Maybe. Yes. He's always been damn sure he'd end up owning the place. He never had the right. Where did he get that from? You know, honey, just sheer hope. The Golden Spike was the one place his mother loved. He took care of her when she couldn't take care of the bar. And then he took care of the bar, too, when Hugh got too old to do it. Like I said, it's what he does. Hugh said he could have the place if y'all didn't come home, and he was close to believing you never would. Adele felt like she'd tuned into a station that wasn't coming in clearly. If she moved her head, maybe it would get clearer. She shifted in her seat. Nope, still static. And then I came to town, and worse, I went and goddamn fell in love with him. Dixie leaned forward, a small smile at her mouth. I know. No, you didn't. Honestly, who wouldn't have fallen in love with that man? I like women, and I'm half in love with them myself. Adele gave a laugh that felt more like a sob. What do I do now? Oh, honey, I'm so bad at relationships. I live in a trailer, so I won't accidentally let someone move in. Really? Kind of. The one I want to move in is already living with someone else. Adele nodded and perched her elbows on the table. So, we're both doomed. Yep. I have to apologize to him. Dixie, for the first time, looked unsure. What? Didn't you say you called his mother, like, whore? Adele felt her face go red. I didn't say that, I just... Oh, God, I did. That's exactly what I said. How am I supposed to fix this? And didn't you say that you thought he slept with you to get the bar from you? I don't know. Adele hit her knee on the underside of the table. I don't feel like I know anything except that I want to fix it. Maybe you can't. Dixie looked into her tilted mug as if she'd find more coffee at the bottom of it. Oh, no, that's my superpower. I always fix things. Always. Dixie shook her head. And Nate always thinks he can keep things safe. Sometimes don't say it. You're both wrong a lot. That's all I'm saying. Adele dug her heels into the astroturf, making an almost inaudible sound. I can fix it. Okay, then. Good luck. I can. She straightened and tried to believe herself. I will fix it. All of it. She had to. Chapter 39. Nate entered the bar at the very last minute. He went straight to the stage without looking towards the cash register. He didn't want to see either one of them, Dixie, because she'd probably laugh at him or something. And there was nothing funny in the whole world. Or Adele. Because he'd gone and gotten twisted up over that woman. As twisted as old, rusted barbed wire. Good for nothing but making people bleed and snapping under any weight at all. You're here. Mac looked happy, if happiness could be judged when the guy never took off his sunglasses. I thought you'd chicken out. You didn't leave me much choice, did you? Hey, we can't play without a guitarist. There have to be 100 in this town. None that know our songs. Our songs ain't hard. Scrugg looked up from fiddling with a leg on his kick drum. Hey, don't insult our songs. No one needs more than 3 chords. Hi. The voice came soft from behind him. He should have known. She crept up on a man like the flu. You didn't see it coming till you were flat out and done for, almost dead. Hey. I'm glad you're here. Why bother pulling punches? So you can gloat? Nate finally turned and immediately wished he hadn't. She was in some light-colored doily-like dress that pulled in at her waist with a red belt, accentuating her high breasts. The skirt was short enough to show enough leg to make a man crazy. Shiny red heels, red lips to match. She looked like a cherry on top of whipped cream, and he'd always been a sucker for sundaes. Or because Dustin Rusty packs them in. Just in it for the money? I'm sorry. He walked past her. Yeah, he'd made it his life's mission never to drink when he was upset, but he'd never had to play a gig in a bar in front of the woman who'd stomped on his heart and stolen his dream. He would help himself to a rum and coke. God help her if she tried to stop him. This was still his place. In his heart, this was still where he belonged. Here, with these people. Norma was sitting at the bar. Was she looking skinnier? Sometimes she forgot to eat protein altogether if he didn't remind her. She was talking to Parrot Freddie, laughing raucously at something he'd said. Or maybe it was something the parrot Ethel had said. Willie Rayburn and his brother Wagoner were playing dice in their own leather cups. The bar's cups had never been quite sturdy enough for their tastes. Lily Dario was just disappearing out the back door into the courtyard, hand in hand with one of the 2 Petes. He'd have to ask her about that later. Or maybe he wouldn't. He couldn't take care of the whole damn world. His boots stalled, though, on the threshold of going behind the bar. It was her place. She'd fired him. He wasn't doing real well taking care of anyone, not even himself. He didn't work here, and he couldn't help himself to a damn thing. It would be wrong to push her. And for once, he wished like hell he was the type to push a woman, to push her as far as she'd go before she snapped. But god damn it, he wasn't. A bag of salt and vinegar chips hit him in the chest. Adele grinned at him. Want a drink? She was too cheeky, too insouciant. He couldn't play that game tonight. What the hell had he been thinking? He wanted to kiss her, to take her to bed, to yell at her all night, to listen to her yell back. He couldn't play guitar and sing, not in front of her. And then Nate looked up. Over her head. What the hell? It wasn't a question. He knew what it was. He just didn't know how it had gotten there. Do you like it? Adele looked worried, as if his opinion mattered to her. The huge frame over the mirror held a blown-up photo of Hugh and Nate's mother. They were grinning at each other, standing at the bar they were now overlooking, expressions of sheer delight in both their faces. It was a gut punch of emotion that threatened to level him, and that, by God, was not okay. Where did that come from? I found a small version in Hugh's apartment, also framed. I got it blown up. I'm not sure who the photographer was that day, but isn't it great? I think I took that shot. With his old Nikon. It had been raining outside, he remembered. He'd come in to find them warm and happy behind the bar, and his heart had expanded with love for both of them. That had been a good day. She looked worried, a small line appearing between her eyebrows. Is it okay? Not my business. Literally. I hoped you would like it. They both look so happy, don't they? He nodded. There was no denying that. They looked like they were about to play a practical joke on someone, or just had. His mother was even pretty in the photo, light snapping in her eyes, and Hugh was just as bright. Oh, my God. Her voice was low. You see it, too. They'd been in love. They'd been in love? Hugh had loved his mother like that. How had he never seen it until he looked at the photo? I didn't know. I didn't know until I saw this either. It's nice, I think. He rubbed his neck, which suddenly ached as much as his stupid heart.
What else was there in the world that he didn't understand? Was it all this obvious? Was he just stupid? His mother seemed happy in that shot. Suddenly, the reason why Hugh had taken care of her so long made sense. It was crystal clear. You're an idiot, Houston. He looked at Adele, let her image sear into his brain so that he wouldn't forget it. For so many reasons. Can I get a rum and coke? He thought for a moment. Please. The picture hanging over her head made him hand over that courtesy, grudgingly. He'd give her a thank you and $1 tip because he was a decent man. He'd play his set, then he'd quit the band, and he'd never set foot in the saloon again as long as he lived. Chapter 40. Adele had asked Scrugg her question when he arrived. Scrugg had asked Mac, and neither of them, because she had asked them not to, had asked Nate. So when they finished the first half of their set, when Nate's back was already turned as he unstrapped his guitar, Adele stepped onto the stage. Her heart beat so fast it almost hurt. Her breath caught. "Hi," she said into the mic. The crowd, the biggest one she'd seen in the saloon so far, went silent, expectant. Good Lord, she hoped she didn't let them down. She hoped she didn't let him down. She held up his mother's guitar, the old Martin. "Do you mind if I play this?" Nate looked startled, as if she just slapped him across the eye. You can. You don't want to, though. It won't stay in tune. I put new pegs on it. It holds true now. Nate blinked hard. Then he nodded. The three men stepped off the stage into the crowd on the dance floor. She lost track of Mac and Scrugg almost immediately, but not Nate. Adele felt him there, in the darkness. She couldn't see his face against the spotlight shining in her eyes, but she could see his outline. She could feel his stare against her skin. She overheated instantly and felt the sweat start at her hairline. Sexy. She just needed to do this. Okay, then. I wrote this song. It's due to my publisher next week, and I thought it was going to be late, but then it kind of came to me. Her words tumbled over each other like a bird wheeling too fast to the ground. Soon she'd crash. This is the first time it's been played out. I hope you like it. Hope was so small a word for what she felt in her chest. A swell as huge as the ocean's tide rose inside her, and she strummed the first G chord. Simple lyrics, simple chords. She could do this. It's called My Confession. She sang. The cafe's closed, the sink's got mold, the fridge is warm and the beer's not cold. Oysters gone, the fries are too. But it all tastes right when I'm here with you. Doors don't lock and the beds are gone. Roof is open to the break of dawn. Hotel can't hold more than one or two, but it's all good when that's me and you. The room was silent behind her words. They were listening. They were supporting her. Adele remembered this feeling, the way the audience could either tear you down or hold you up. They were holding her now, and thank God they were. Her spine was liquid and her hairline damp with sweat. Fear danced through her, and still she could only see his outline in the dark. She gathered every ounce of bravery she could and kept singing. This saloon is old, and some wood is broke. The floor is rough, the air is smoke. The roof, it leaks, and the door's untrue. But it's paradise when I'm here with you. The lights out back, they dip and sway. You took the stars and you made them stay. You held this place and you made it new. And I confess, no. Adele couldn't sing the last words. She just couldn't. They were ridiculous. She'd written the song and she thought it would work a miracle. She was so stupid for thinking this would be okay, that this would help, that this would do anything but humiliate her in front of a town full of people who seemed to care about her. She'd run if she just stuck the mic back in the stand and started running. Then a voice rose out of the dark. And I confess. His voice rich, dark as the bar, and warm. Clumsily, she strummed the abandoned chord. Then she raised her voice to join Nate's. Together, they sang the words that had been ripped from her soul and hung between them like the line of stars in the courtyard. They sang the line that was inevitable,
the only way the song could end. And I confess, I'm in love with you. Then he was on the stage, the guitar pressed between their bodies, and he was kissing her, and she was kissing him back and laughing, and there was clapping from somewhere close by, but really, there was only him. There was only Nate. I'm sorry, she started, and she was. I'm so sorry. I did everything the wrong way from the very beginning. From the moment I walked in here and didn't see immediately what was important. Him, Nate, was the most important. So did I. Adele. Wait, can we start over? He gave a short laugh. All the way to the beginning. She nodded. Yes. We can try. Behind them, the jukebox started playing an old Porter Wagoner tune. Adele tugged Nate's hand, pulling him off stage, almost tripping as she went. She felt his other hand at her waist, making sure she stayed steady. She dragged him into an even darker corner, under the broken chorus sign. Then she stuck out her hand. Hi, I'm Adele Darling. Nate Houston. You're sure pretty. Adele grabbed for breath as his arms went around her waist. Her mouth was inches from his. She would not kiss him, not now, even though it was all her body wanted. Nice to meet you. What I'd really like to find out about the Golden Spike is, well, maybe it's financial paperwork. Screw this place. What? Adele had a whole plan to start over, to start honestly. I don't give a shit about this place. You love it. I love you. Everything else, every single thing is secondary. If his arms hadn't been around her waist, her legs would have buckled. As it was, she sagged a little. Oh. Oh. That's your response to me telling you I love you. I just... Tears came to her eyes. What? I've always been a songbird. Nate kissed her cheek, catching the tear. But this is the first time I've really been able to fly. She leaned her forehead against his. I love you. I love you so much I might die of it. Oh, God, Adele. I thought you were going to break my heart, he said, moving his lips to her hair, his hands against her cheek. Isn't that your job? No, I don't break things. She smiled at him. I fix them. Epilogue. Oh, my, said Adele. What do you think? Norma spread her arms wide. The suit was my father's. Instead of Norma's usual flowing skirts, she wore a Santa Claus suit that looked the worse for its years. The enormous and frayed red suit was belted at the midpoint of her girth. She wore a Santa hat that stood so high she'd had to duck as she entered the room, and a fluffy white something perched precariously above her bosom. My beard, Norma said and pulled it up for a second. It's itchy, though. She let it fall flat again. 4 or 5 necklaces of bells were strung around her neck, and she jingled merrily with each breath. Is that... how did you... 3 full strings of outdoor Christmas lights. Norma was lit like a holiday sale at Walmart, all flashing colored lights and twinkles. How did you do that? Norma opened the top of the red jacket to display a dozen wires taped to a tie-dyed t-shirt. Full battery pack with a DC converter. You look like a mad bomber. Norma looked pleased. Thank you. Dixie, a martini. Make it minty and seasonal. Adele hurried to the stage, hoping that no epileptics got too close to Norma tonight. If anyone could trigger a seizure, it would be her. Dixie, already pouring gin into a shaker, called, You have 2 more messages from the media. No more, called Adele. If they want to sing small-town carols, they can just show up like the rest of them. Adele jiggled the amp's plug in the socket and then tested the speakers. It was going to be a big night at the Golden Spike. Adele had been running since early morning, making sure the soda vendor came. He hadn't last week, and half the bridge club had complained about it, the other half happy enough to drink whiskey. Adele had swept and mopped the floors in extra time, and she'd polished the bar until the wood gleamed. She'd rearranged the storerooms so that they'd have more space for the extra 2 kegs of pumpkin-flavored beer that should be arriving any minute. The saloon and its holiday sing-along had been written up, and not just in the local paper. Not sure they'd be interested in her little announcement. Adele had sent both the San Francisco Chronicle and the Eureka Times-Standard a press release anyway. Holiday sing-along and hootenanny at the Golden Spike. The media loved it.
A darling songbird home for the holidays, leading the Christmas carols with local favorite Dust and Rusty backing everyone up. It was delicious small-town flavor, and after the papers had run it, 2 different affiliate TV stations had showed up, antennae sprouting from the van's roofs. Adele had given 3 interviews already, and it wasn't even fully dark yet. Every spare room in town was rented, and Adele wished for the millionth time they'd had a chance to fix up even one extra room in the hotel above. But running the saloon was proving a full-time job. She loved it, but it wasn't easy. "Hey, Earl Cornejo called and asked if you could kick things off with the bagpipes." Dixie's words were punctuated by the ice clattering in the shaker. "Of course he can. When's Nate coming?" Adele knew Nate and Dixie had had lunch together that afternoon. Dixie rattled the shaker harder. "Hey, Dixie, when's Nate coming in? I think his cell phone is dead. He hasn't answered my texts all afternoon." Instead of answering the question, Dixie slid the martini to Norma. "Minty fresh, like holiday toothpaste. Now you'll be ready for the mistletoe." "Dixie?" Adele straightened, wiping her dusty hands on her jeans. Blinking quickly, Dixie said, "Yeah? What's going on?" "Nothing." Dixie shook her head hard. "Absolutely nothing. Why? Why aren't you looking at me? What are you hiding?" Dixie pressed a hand to her chest. "Me? Nothing. Nothing at all." Norma, too, was staring too hard at the photo of Hugh and Donna above the bar, as if they might start moving in the frame. "Something's going on, and you both know it. I want to know what it is." Dixie leaned forward, her hands flat on the bar. She spoke in a stage whisper. "Nate has a little surprise for you, but don't you dare let on that I said anything." "What is it? Are you kidding me? He may not be my boss anymore, but I'm still not risking his wrath." "Wait, I am your boss. I order you to tell me." "No way." "Well, then you're fired." "Again? You're so trigger happy." Unconcerned, Dixie turned the overhead TV to the Yule log channel. "Here we go." "Fine. Don't tell me." A shiver of excitement slid up Adele's spine. She couldn't imagine what the surprise might be, but whatever it was, she knew it would be good. One night, Nate had gotten a serious look on his face that had both thrilled and terrified her, and then he'd fastened a chain around her neck. The pendant was his mother's 2-month sobriety chip. There was no present he could give her that would ever mean more to her than that. "Did he go back to work after your lunch?" She couldn't remember what he'd said his schedule was today, but if it was like other days, it would be grueling. Nate came home exhausted from his long days of work with Adult Protective Services, and he sometimes had haunted shadows behind his eyes from what he'd seen. He would lie with Adele on the old parlor sofa, and together they'd listen to the quiet noises of the street below. She would kiss his temple and listen to him, and then she'd tell him what she'd accomplished at the Spike that day. Always less than she wanted to. There was still so much to do. Then he'd kiss her. Really, truly kiss her, and the whole world melted away. Adele wrapped her fingers around the necklace. The jukebox, as if warming up for the night to come, swung into a country version of "Oh, Come All Ye Faithful." Norma laughed at something Dixie had said, and Parrot Freddie came in, both birds on his shoulders. He said they sometimes sang along to Jingle Bells, and Adele was hoping to hear their version at some point in the evening. But sweet Patsy Cline, what was the surprise? Adele stood at the edge of the stage and tucked one more strand of tinsel around the extra microphone stands. She heard the swinging door slap open, then closed. "Come on now, this place doesn't look so bad." The voice came from behind her. Everything in Adele's body stilled. Her brain replayed the words once, and then once again. She turned slowly. The hope, if she was wrong, would kill her. And if she was right, the happiness might do exactly the same. "Hi," said Molly. It was Molly, her Molly. She looked tired, dark circles under her eyes. Her black shirt dress hung on her as if she'd recently lost weight. Adele launched herself at her sister, almost knocking her down with the force of her hug. You, you! You came! You came home!" Then Adele didn't know who was crying harder, her or Molly or Norma, who was wiping away her tears with her Santa beard. "How did you get here? How long are you staying? Have you met Nate?" Because Nate was there, standing behind Molly with the most satisfied look on his face. "We met," said Molly, sniffing hard. "He got me here. It's been hell trying to keep it a secret." "I can't believe—" Adele swallowed the sob in her throat. "Thank you." She met his eye. "Thank you."
She'd tell him more, so much more, later. If he'd scrambled up a ladder to steal her the moon, he couldn't have brought her anything that could have made her happier. "We're singing tonight," and an even headier joy filled her. If she drank all the liquor in the bar, she couldn't be drunker on happiness. "We're singing. Together." Molly nodded. "I got here in time, then." "Will you stay for Christmas? Please stay, please. Stay." Molly bit her lower lip and then nodded. "Yes, but don't push, okay? One step at a time." Adele held up her hands. "Promise." Then her hand fell and she clutched the chip at her throat. "Oh, Molly." Her sister turned in place. "You'll have to show me everything. The wreckage, all of it." "I will. I will." "And introduce me to everyone." Nate laughed. "You don't have to worry about that. Every single resident will be in here trying to catch a glance of you tonight. Word's already spread." He looked suspiciously at Adele. "You really didn't know?" Adele leaned against him, grateful for his bulk, for his solidity. "Not a clue." "Hey, that isn't the old jukebox," said Molly. She moved forward to look at it. Nate dropped a kiss on the top of Adele's head. "Happy?" "It would be impossible for me to be happier. It would probably be illegal. Unless Lana was here." It was an ungrateful thought, and Adele banished it. This, right here, was all she needed. She wrapped her arm around Nate's waist. "How am I going to thank you?" Molly moved to the middle of the floor and looked out the side window, towards the shuttered cafe. "Nate said you were standing right there when I first saw you. And you hated me." "I loved you. I think I've always loved you, even when I didn't know it." Joy made Adele's heart soar. She was opening her mouth to respond when Norma, still seated at the bar, gave a screech. "Lord have mercy! Would you look at this?" She gave another shrill cry. "Look!" Norma jabbed her finger at the tarot cards. "A wedding is on the horizon." She looked up from her cards, peeking at Dixie, and then over her shoulder at Adele and Nate. "And I see a baby here. A baby coming." Adele blinked hard. Next to her, she could hear Nate swallow. "And I also see plenty of drinks on the house. I can see it in the cards right here. Look."
This has been The Darling Songbirds, written by Rachael Herron, narrated by Exie Sands. Post-production provided by Amanda Rose Smith. Copyright 2016 by Rachael Herron. Production copyright 2017 by Rachael Herron. Thank you for listening.